Is that Wild Turkey 2027 where they've got weeded whiskey, weeded bourbon now?
Oh, I don't think we're going to do weeded at Wild Turkey, but you never know. You never know.
Welcome to another trip down the Bourbon Road with your hosts, Jim and Mike. So grab a glass of your favorite bourbon and kick back.
We would like to thank Tommy and Gwen Mitchell from Logheads Home Center for supporting this episode of the Bourbon Road. Find out more about their fine rustic furniture at logheadshomecenter.com. Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Shannon.
And I'm Mike Hyatt.
And this is the Bourbon Road. And today, Mike, we are once again in StreamYard, but this time with a very good friend.
So we got Rare Bird 101, a.k.a. David Jennings from North Augusta, South Kakalaki. That'd be South Carolina for all you Northerners out there. David, how you doing, man?
Doing great. How y'all?
Doing really good. We're so glad you decided to drink bourbon with us tonight. You know, it's always good when you can sit down with a few bottles of a Wild Turkey Expression and
amen.
And chat with a fella that has probably tasted most of the expressions that have been around in the last 10 or 15, 20 years or more, right?
I've had a few of them.
So David, for all of our listeners out there, you are the end-all, be-all for Wild Turkey, right? You're the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to
that's Jimmy
Wild
Russell.
Turkey knowledge. besides Jimmy Russell, you're the guy that has all that knowledge about Wild Turkey in your head, though, right?
Well, I'm what they call. People will say expert. I say I'm not an expert, but you can call me an expert fan. So I'm a super fan. It's just something I got passionate about a few years ago and really took a dive enough to where, I started a blog and now I have a book that's out, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But, really it's total admiration. I'm not an employee of Campari or Wild Turkey. I never have been. All of this I do out of love for, what I consider the best bourbon in the world. It's just genuine appreciation. That's what it is.
So we just call you a Wild Turkey bullshitter then.
Yeah, well, I'm Wild Turkey super fan. How about that one? We'll do that.
Well, David, we have had you on the show before. You were actually one of our earlier guests. You were on episode 6, and that was well over a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you were having kind of a super user meet in Lexington, Kentucky. I guess it's your Patreon. You get out and visit your patrons from time to time. And
yeah, that was my annual meeting. That's right.
Yeah, it was great. We really enjoyed the time with you there, and you carved out a little time for us, and we were able to record an episode. And at that time, you were just starting on your book, and we're going to get into all about what you've had going on in the last year. But one of the things that we like to do, Mike, is what?
Well, I was getting to it. I was like, oh man, we got to drink some whiskey here.
We like to drink whiskey pretty early in the show.
So the first one we want to drink is the Wild Turkey, the new bottled and bond 17 year.
Yeah, the Master's Keep. Yep. It's a fantastic expression. Most of the reviews have been really, really, the praise has been high, I guess I should say.
Sure.
For me, it was very, very high. It was top of my scale. I've heard a few folks that aren't too crazy about it, mainly because of the oak influence. But, if you don't appreciate a real oaky bourbon, this is not for you. You've got to like some oak. And when I say oak, I mean like some serious oak. But if you like that in your bourbon, this is about as good as it gets.
Yeah. Well, let's check it out, guys. Yeah, so that oak is it is really present there, and it's kind of fragrant, right? I mean, it's kind of a
like a potpourri.
Yeah, I guess that's probably a good term for it.
Yeah, it's got that potpourri. It's got a nice cherry vibe to it, like a burnt cherry or a cherry wood. Fred Minnick called it cherry pie. I mean, I could see that. heavy
Maybe-
charry kind of notes,
Maybe a smoked cherry pie.
Yeah. Oh, now that's a good.
There
Hey,
you go.
there. Yeah.
Never
I
had
like
a
that
smoked cherry pie, but I could get that.
I can relate. Yeah.
I get some smokiness out of it.
Mhm.
Maybe it's because that oak has been, it's been sitting in the oak so long, but
It's got a lot of herbal, like dark herbal spice to it. And like maybe like some blood orange, I could easily see someone pulling out tobacco and leather, these types of earthier notes. It's got a lot of character for how many years and what the proof is. And that, not to mention, it's bottled in bond. So this is all one season, I mean, there's not a lot of whiskeys on the market that can compare specs or flavor wise.
Well, let's taste it.
It's all downhill from here. We picked a hell of a bourbon to start with,
Well, the two that we're having here, and we won't talk yet about what we're going to have in the second half, but it kind of made sense to have this one first, in my opinion.
Okay.
But maybe not. We'll find out. I guess.
We'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely it's very similar on the palate. I think it's got but it's you're getting a little bit more spice on it. I'm getting some clove and maybe some a little bit of pepper.
Yeah, clove in there for sure. Someone could find, sassafras, all these types of earthy, sweet, earthy kind of licorice, these types of things, just, sing in this whiskey. One thing I found is, I enjoyed it the first time I tried it, but I didn't really appreciate it till, a couple weeks later after someone had sent me 2 samples. I had the first one and then I waited a little while and had the second one. And I guess I kind of knew what I was going into. And I compared it with the original 17 year, which a lot of people enjoy.
Sure.
I should rephrase that. The original 17 year is a 2001 17 year. That's a duty free export type release. But the original 17 year is the original Master's Keep 17 year. That was 86.8 proof. I compared the two, and on the nose, they had a lot of similarities. But then when you hit that palate and finished, it's like, in my opinion, the bottled and bond just destroyed it. I mean, it was like, this is next level. Not that the original Master's Keep 17 year isn't fantastic. It is, but this is just the next level once you hit that palate and finish.
I'm actually getting some Whorehound root beer candy on that.
Yeah,
More
sassafras. Yeah. Whorehound and sassafras kind of give you that root beer type, vibe. It's got a lot of that character to it. Those old fashioned candies, the chews, the old molasses chews and things like that.
Well, we know you're a good Southern country boy when you know what a whorehound is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would always get Whorehound candy over the corner store. They had like a bag it was like a little cardboard looking bag, and it just had like a generic, you could get like lemon drops and cherry and stuff like that, and Whorehound was in there. I like those old fashioned candies. You don't see them anymore, but like clove gum and beech nut gum and those types of things.
Man, you can still get that stuff. You just got to know where to go to.
I guess you got to have you got to know the secret.
Well, the Whorehounds you can get at Tractor Supply, I think, right?
Yeah. Cracker Barrel maybe too.
Oh yeah,
been a
Cracker
while.
Barrel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, David, you started your whiskey journey a number of years back, and you actually talk about that a little bit in your book. I think you said like 6 years ago you began kind of your whiskey journey. And can you kind of give us just a little bit on how you got into whiskey and sort of what was your gateway?
Well, I mean, I always appreciated, bourbon, Jack Daniel's, Tennessee whiskey, even Crown Royal. When I was young in college, having a Jim and Coke or Jack and Coke, Crown and Coke, these types of things were my favorite things to drink, more so than beer. I was never really a beer guy. I mean, I can appreciate a nice cold beer every once in a while, but it was just never my preference. And that was kind of what whiskey was to me for many, many years. It was just a mixer. And it wasn't too long ago, like you said, maybe 6 years ago or so, I was introduced to whiskey on the rocks from my brother-in-law, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought. I thought he was making me a mixed drink, and when he gave it to me on the rocks, I was like, this is interesting. And I liked it a lot. So went out to a bunch of liquor stores and started picking up different whiskeys, whether they were Scotch or Irish or Canadian or eventually bourbon. I just started trying to find the best, whiskey in the world kind of thing. I'm going to find the best whiskey. And you get on blogs and you buy books and you buy magazines and, you're trying to narrow it down, what is the best. And of course, I follow a lot of the paths that a lot of other people that are in the hobby are in now, where we're chasing weeded bourbons and things that are popular. But I stayed clear from Wild Turkey just because I remembered Wild Turkey from my college days as being like the shooter bourbon. And, that was kind of what you did to kind of get wasted for the most. And so I never really considered it a serious whiskey. In my mind, it was kind of what I considered maybe rot gut or old man's whiskey or something. And one day I picked up a pint at checkout and I brought it back, intending for it to maybe be material for a laughable review. And it ended up being really good. So much so I was like, wow, this is great. And I started kind of buying it pretty regularly. And I would talk about it on Reddit. That time I was pretty active on our bourbon. And someone reached out to me and asked me if I had Dusty Turkey. And I went down that rabbit hole and started buying every Wild Turkey expression I could find in hopes of finding something similar to those Dusty Pours, which we all know that's not realistic with any brand. Right. But in the process, I discovered a lot of whiskeys that I loved and fell in love with the brand even more when I started researching its history. And I've always appreciated the underdog, which very much Wild Turkey is. And all of that eventually just led to me writing a bunch of Wild Turkey reviews and putting them on a blog that I eventually shared with the world, and never imagined it would take off like it did. There's a lot of people out there that love Wild Turkey and that are discovering that you don't have to spend a lot of money to find something very high quality. And I think that resonates with a lot of people right now. That's where it all kind of started with just, you pick it up, you taste it for what it is, and your love grows.
David, how much time a day do you spend like researching or thinking or just doing Wild Turkey? What do you spend a day on that?
Well, I have a Patreon account, and I try to keep that rather updated. I feel like I need to, provide content, and frankly, I enjoy it. So I look forward to sharing, whether it's a review or a new blend I'm trying or a video or whatever. I try to maintain a lot more content on my Patreon than I do my blog. My blog is a post that I do once a week. And sometimes those posts I can write in, a day or two. And then sometimes it takes me several days or all week, depending on, what it's about and how much I need to research or how much time I need to spend on the subject or how I'm motivated. It just all depends. But, I definitely spend a couple hours every day working on whether it's blog posts or Patreon posts or videos, or I might just be tasting things. So I might be tasting things, making notes that I'll be using later when I'm sharing things with patrons or readers on the blog.
I noticed yesterday you kind of teased the whiskey world a little bit, and you put up a post of the small bottle of WB Saffel, and then you have a gigantic bottle, the 1.75 bottle, and I guess you made that label, but it's really a blend you did at your house, right?
Yeah, I was kind of trolling Instagram for a little while there, and it was amazing to see how many people actually thought it was real for a minute there. My inkjet printer prints pretty well, I guess. But yeah, I had, a while back last year, I came up with what I call a hack. It's basically a blend I came up with to imitate WB Saffel. And I spent time on it going back and forth with the real Saffel, trying to narrow down as close as I could. And I think I did pretty well with that. So people have been aware of that for a while. And I'd made a joke a few weeks ago on Discord. Well, I wasn't really joking. I was kind of half joking, but I was like, maybe I really will do this. But I said something about, making a handle of Saffel. So I started going through my cabinet and I'm like, I've got a lot of CNA picks and CNF picks. And of course, I'm picking up Rare Breed all the time and Russell's 10 all the time. And those are the components for the blend. So I thought, well, I need some cabinet space. So let's do this. And I got out the measuring cup and I went to town. And of course, before then I had to get the bottle cleaned up. So I had to, soak that and then put some goof off on it to get the residue off. But I just took a 101 handle and cleaned it up and then rinsed it and it dried. And I, filled it up and printed off the SAFL label from the TTB website, sized it accordingly, and that was that. But a lot of people ended up, thinking it was real. But
so if any of our listeners are curious about the recipe to make that, they just go to rarebird101.com, right? And
there's a Russell's. Yeah, you can do a search for Hackle, and it'll pull up the Russell's 10 review from like November or something of last year, and it's within that post. But I mean, for your listeners, it's equal parts Rare Breed 116.8, Russell's 10 year, a CNA Russell's Reserve CNA single barrel pick, and a CNF Russell's Reserve single barrel pick, and just equal parts. So yeah, and then feel free to tweak it or sub something out.
You can't go wrong because they're all good whiskeys, right?
That's right. But I found it's a solid blend. I mean, it's one that I make, from time to time. I always have it on hand. It's one of the only blends that I actually make on a regular basis. There's no other blend I can think of that I've come up with that I keep on a regular basis, but that one I do.
I was like, look at this joker, man. He's just fooled a whole bunch of people. Well, he's got a good sense of humor.
What's inside is real. It's very much, real wild turkey whiskey, and it's all quality. I think I calculated up. It was like about $114 worth in that handle. But I mean, a SAFL costs like, $50, a pop. So
it's a $375
for $375. So,
right.
You're coming out ahead of the game doing the Hackle.
Well, let's talk about your book. Let's get into that. So you just released American Spirit Wild Turkey Bourbon from Ripy to Russell, and that's something you're pretty proud of, right?
Oh, damn proud of it. I mean, I'm thrilled. Never thought it would be what it is. I mean, my wife had mentioned to me a couple of years ago that I should write a book. Seemed like a task that, seemed like, foreign to me completely because I've never written a book. And I told her, hey, I don't know if I can write a book. And she's like, well, you write every day. So, why don't you just turn that into a book? So I got to thinking about it and I'm like, why not? So I started and I'm like, well, this isn't as bad as I thought it'd be. And you just it's like eating an elephant, it's one bite at a time. And eventually I had a draft and I sent that off to a few people just to get their opinions and fact check and this type of stuff. And that's when I started the Kickstarter campaign that we had talked about in the last podcast. And the original intention was to just have a book that was kind of like a print on demand through services like, Kindle Publishing or something like that. And after the Kickstarter did so well, I realized that, I could take those funds and invest it into the book, hired Victor Sizemore, who in my opinion is the best photographer in whiskey. And I hired Brett Atlas to copy edit, and I worked out a deal with Mascot Books to get something designed that would look professional. They're a hybrid publisher, so it's not a traditional publishing company, but the product they create is exactly like what you would get with a traditional publisher. So all of that worked out nicely, and I ended up with a book after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that was a lot better than what I ever envisioned originally. And I have to thank my Kickstarters and Patreon supporters and all the folks that helped shape it and create it and craft it along the way. Very much proud of this book. And I hope to keep it updated over the years. But I want to say thank you to everybody that contributed and helped me in making this happen.
And so, David, this book is actually available in the Wild Turkey gift shop at the distillery. That's right. Yeah, that's
right. I mean, isn't that cool? I'm just so thankful of that. These kind of things you dream about and you never think that they'll come true, and to see that a reality. It really, when Bo had told me that it was being stocked, I was just so thrilled. So yes, and I think they only have a few copies left. Of course, I'm into my second printing now, so hopefully in the next couple of weeks, everybody will be restocked, and people will be able to purchase online and at the visitor center and Justin's and anywhere else that the book was being sold before. So just got to hang in there a few more weeks.
I'm gonna have to beat Bo up for not telling me, because I went over there a couple weeks ago and stopped off to get this bottle of Bond, and Bo was in there working, and he didn't see me walk in. And I told the little girl there, I said, "You tell Bo I'm here to whoop his ass." And he heard me. I said it loud enough. He spun around. He's like, "Who said that?"
That was awesome.
Big Chief's here.
Bo was an awesome guy. I mean, he's just as big of a Wild Turkey fan as me. So just a great guy.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
Well, David, one of the statements you made in your book kind of stuck out to me. You said that Wild Turkey embodies the essence of America.
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind of tell me what you mean by that?
Well, you can look at that from a lot of angles. In terms of the spirit itself, as in the whiskey, to me, it doesn't really get any more American than Wild Turkey. I know a lot of people think Jack Daniels, they think, Jim Beam, because those are very popular brands that sell very well, and there's nothing against those brands. I appreciate a lot of Jim Beam products, and I particularly like Jack Daniels Single Barrel Proof, and they make great whiskey, both of them. But to me, the story of Wild Turkey is, in many ways, the story of America. I mean, you have immigrants coming, to America, starting a small store, turning that store into a investment into a distillery, into many investments into distilleries, into eventually falling victim to prohibition, opening it back up, and producing whiskey again. And you have a large company like Austin Nichols coming in and purchasing the brand in the 70s. And then you have the story of the Russells. Jimmy Russell, he's like the all-star American, kid, great at every sport he could do. He signs on the distillery, just thinking it might just be a temporary job, and ends up being not just a lifetime career. He's the longest tenured master distiller in the world. He's made bourbon longer than anybody else around. He's made whiskey longer than anyone else around. And he's passed that knowledge on to his son, Eddie, and Eddie has shared that with his son, Bruce. You just have a lot of things like tradition and family. And you have this sense of community there in Lawrenceburg. It just has so many elements to me that are just, a picturesque kind of, it's like the ideal America. It's total Americana. And so when you take a look at Wild Turkey as a brand, to me, that is what I consider, an iconic American brand. Now, people may not agree with me, and a lot of people always throw out, well, they're owned by Campari, or they were owned by Pernod, or whatever. Well, I mean, Jim Beam is owned by Suntory. A lot of brands have foreign ownership. That's not, unusual, but that doesn't mean that the heart of the brand itself doesn't scream America. And I think that those foreign investors want that. I think they're looking for a brand that has a genuine, authentic type of American vibe to it. And, if it didn't have that, they probably wouldn't invest in it. So, there's so many different angles you can look at in that statement. But I'm looking at heritage, and like I mentioned, tradition, authenticity. There's so many things you can relate, in my mind, between Wild Turkey and the American dream, basically.
If you thought about Jimmy and Eddie both, have you ever looked at their, like, not just lineage, but like a coaching tree, what the master distillers and other distillers have come out of there, and now they're other distilleries? One that comes to mind for me is Alex Castle at Old Dominic now, and probably some lineage she took with her to Old Dominic from Wild Turkey.
Well, I've never really looked at it that way. I've always kind of thought about it as, if you follow the trail there, from Mr. Hughes, Bill Hughes, who taught Jimmy how to distill, he passed that on to Eddie. And Eddie, is now, helping Bruce as well as Jimmy, rise up. I've kind of looked at that Russell lineage as kind of linear, but it sounds like, maybe I'm missing. There's folks I'm sure that they've inspired and trained and help, like you said, send them out into the world to do their own things. And yes, I'm probably missing a lot of those folks, and I apologize for not being as knowledgeable on that as probably you are. But it would not surprise me because Jimmy and Eddie know what the hell they're doing. So they've probably taught a lot of people some really good things.
That's really the only person I know that came from there.
Okay.
That would just be
if you could pick, one master distiller to work under, I mean, who wouldn't pick Jimmy Russell right now? It's just he's a legend.
And he's kind of affectionately referred to as the master distiller's master distiller, right?
Correct. Yeah. He's the last of the living legends. He really is.
Look, I just came up with your next book right there.
Someone really should write a book about some of the master distiller all-stars, with the Elmer T. Lees and the Parker Beam and Booker Noe. Someone should really sit down and kind of, make a book where they highlight, some of Kentucky's finest. I think it would do really well, but, I'm not necessarily that person because, I'm so brand focused, and it would be hard for me to spend so much of my time researching each of those, but it's out there right for the picking for someone listening.
That'd be Big Chief's book right there. Don't steal my idea.
Well, go for it, man. Do it.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to take a short break here, and when we come back, we have another expression from the Wild Turkey Distillery that we're gonna sample with you, David. We'll talk a little bit more about your book and some other things you have going on. We'll see everybody when we get back. We would like to thank Tommy and Gwen Mitchell from Logheads Home Center for supporting this episode of The Bourbon Road. Logheads Home Center, nestled in the hills of Kentucky, is an industry leader in building handcrafted rustic furniture. Family owned and operated, they take pride in offering only the very best for their customers. The Logheads, and that's what they like to call themselves, are skilled woodcrafters who are passionate about creating rustic furniture for people who appreciate the beauty of natural wood. Owners Tommy and Gwen don't just sell the rustic lifestyle, they live it. And you can be sure that Logheads furniture will always be handcrafted in Kentucky by artisans who embrace the simple way of life. Logheads rustic furniture is made from northern white cedar, a sustainable wood that's naturally rot and termite resistant. Its beauty and quality will add warmth to your earthy lifestyle for generations to come. Be sure to check out everything they have to offer at logheadshomecenter.com. And while you're at it, give Tommy and Gwen a shout on Facebook or Instagram at Logheads Home Center.
All right, listeners, we're back. We got Rare Bird 101 here with us, and we're sitting down and we're drinking some whiskey. And Jim has forced me tonight to drink some Rare Breed Barrel Proof Rye.
Oh, yeah. I had to reach through the monitor and twist your arm, didn't I?
So tough. Don't cry.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so what we have for the second half here is I guess this is relatively new, right, David? When did this release?
Yeah. I mean, I got my bottle, I think, May of this year.
Yeah.
And so just a couple months ago, it popped up in Oregon, and a friend of mine let me know about it, and magic, and I got it.
So it's the new Wild Turkey Rare Breed Barrel Proof Rye Whiskey.
Yep.
It is 112.2 proof. It is non-chill filtered. And I'm just going to take a stab at it and say Bruce had something to do with this.
I am sure he did. I mean, honestly, rye for Wild Turkey, Jimmy's not a rye fan, and he's never really been a rye fan. And Eddie's not a huge rye fan either, or wasn't for the longest time. It was really Bruce who kind of reintroduced Eddie into rye and helped shape Eddie's appreciation of it. And so you ended up with, Russell's Reserve Single Barrel Rye in 2013, Cornerstone coming out last year, 2019, and then you have Rare Breed Rye this year in 2020. These, expressions wouldn't have existed, in my opinion, had it not been for Bruce. And now I think that Wild Turkey, with the exception of not really having near as many stocks as they do bourbon, I think they're poised for even greater success on the rye side. It's just going to take a little bit of time for things to mature and have some more available barrels there.
But the market is growing and the demand is growing for ryes.
Definitely.
The tastes, the palates of, whiskey drinkers in America tend to shift a little bit more in a spicy direction, I think. Mm-hmm. Higher proof, more spice. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think that there's several reasons for that. First of all, rye is a great whiskey for cocktails. So, and this is no secret to bartenders. In my opinion, more often than not, you can craft a more flavorful cocktail with a rye than you can a bourbon, just because rye kind of sticks out. It just has that signature spice. And I think that a lot of times when cocktails tend to lean sweet, which they often do, rye is a good way to counter that balance and actually counter the sweetness and introduce balance through that spiciness. Not that there aren't fantastic bourbon cocktails out there. There's many, sure. many, but rye just has a magic to it when it comes to crafting cocktails. I think people have picked up on that. And now I think that people are, I think I know when I first tried rye, straight rye, neat, whatever you want to say, it was like, wow, that's different. And it was not something that I appreciated as much as bourbon. But as time went on and I tried more ryes, different ryes from different producers of different maturities, I started really finding myself, leaning to it, more nights than I had in the past, to where now, I'd say I probably 60% of the time I drink bourbon and probably the other 39%, I drink rye, and then maybe 1%, I'll do scotch or something. But, it's a lot more prevalent in my, rotation than it used to be.
Mike, what are you, 98% and 2%?
I don't know. I'm opened it up a little bit, I guess. 98% wheat and 2% anything else whiskey. No, I think I probably have just as many. I've got a couple bottles of rye now at the house, just for Jim when he comes over, really.
Yeah, I'm kind of the rye guy. I really gravitate towards the ryes. Now, let's talk about ryes for a minute. There are different ryes out there. Mm-hmm. They've got ryes that, the 95.5, the high rye content ryes, mm-hmm. and then you got what they call the Kentucky ryes. Mm-hmm. And what does Rare Breed qualify as?
Oh, it's definitely a Kentucky rye. It's like 52%. It's not anything heavy. It's as close to bourbon as you're going to get, but still a rye.
Sure.
What they call barely legal.
Barely legal, or yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jimmy's just not a big rye fan. So when he, traditionally with Wild Turkey, their rye was always sourced. So it would come from Maryland or, Pennsylvania or Illinois. And when Jimmy took over the rye production, which was in the 70s, he picked a recipe that he could palate, and not being a rye fan, I think that, naturally that's going to be as low of a rye content as you can get and still call it a rye. It's still that signature Wild Turkey, and that's probably from the yeast, but it has that Wild Turkey touch to it. But I think what's really interesting to me is I think this is the area that Wild Turkey should be growing in. Wild Turkey's bourbon recipe is just kind of like so signature Jimmy Russell that you almost just don't want to mess with that. Like, that's Wild Turkey's thing. Wild Turkey just has that one bourbon mash bill, and they get their variants through, maturation and locations of the rick houses. That's always been Wild Turkey's thing. But since rye is not really a Jimmy thing, I don't think anybody would, have any problem whatsoever if Wild Turkey started introducing new rye mash bills, especially if they were like throwback, rye mash bills. Like, well, this was the recipe that we used, back when we were getting rye from Pennsylvania, or this is the recipe that was used with Maryland's rye. And you kind of throw these into the rick houses for aging and pull them out, 6 years from now, see what you get. And you could have some type of, throwback label or something. And the sky's the limit. But this is an area that Wild Turkey can grow in without stepping on Jimmy's toes, or legacy in any way, shape, or form.
So do we have an idea right now, David, what kind of their rye stocks look like and the ages that are available for them to work with on their blending or whatever?
I don't have a number, but it's significantly less than the bourbon. But it's growing because they realized the rye trend was happening and they started producing more rye. They essentially doubled their rye production, which is still so much less than their bourbon production. But, I think that you're going to see a lot more barrels coming of age real soon. Of course, you can introduce a younger rye to the market a lot easier than you can a younger bourbon to the market. And of course, in this Rare Breed Rye has 4-year in it. So, if you had to age state Rare Breed Rye, it would be a 4-year whiskey. But it doesn't taste youthful. To me, it just tastes like a good, solid Kentucky rye with a lot of peppery kick to it. It's that Rare Breed, that signature Wild Turkey boldness, as I like to call it.
Well, let's nose this thing.
Okay, let's do it.
I've already nosed it a whole bunch.
Yeah, so this is for me. I have not had this before. So today, right now, this is my first try on this.
Well, I don't want to influence you. So you let me know what you're thinking.
I get some, this is going to sound funny, but I get some brownie from this. Some chocolate brownies.
You know what? I've never gotten that in this, but when you said that, that happens in whiskey a lot. You throw out some suggestions and it's all subjective, and you can kind of integrate that into your own noses. But to me, I agree with you. There is some type of, like, you pull the brownies out of the oven and they have that chocolate, that bitterness to it, that smell. It's like that bittersweet. Yeah. Totally see where you're getting at.
A little bit of floral notes in there, that country honeysuckle coming through a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Honeysuckle. I'm getting honeysuckle and I'm getting mint too.
Yep. Absolutely. And I get honey lemon. I get like honey and lemon. I get like honey lemon tea, herbal tea, these types of things. I also, in one note that I get in Wild Turkey's rye expressions a lot of times is like frosting or like vanilla icing. So you get like that sharp, or not like a buttercream icing, but like, your old fashioned like cake icing where it have that zing to it.
Yeah.
So I get like that vanilla icing.
I told somebody the other day, we posted about another rye, Jim. I posted about a rye and I said it tasted, the finish on it was like a malted shake because it had so much malted rye in it. And some guy commented on one of the groups and he's like, you don't ever say anything has like a milk taste to it. And I was like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah. He's thinking Ovaltine, I guess.
I guess.
But yeah, one thing I think, to me, and now that you've tasted it, Jim, you might see what I'm saying here. The nose on Rare Breed Rye is very similar to like Wild Turkey 101 Rye. So Wild Turkey 101 Rye and the nose on Rare Breed Rye are very similar in a lot of ways, maybe just kicked up a little bit. But now once you taste Rare Breed Rye, it's its own thing. I mean, it's like you've just the roller coaster has now went over the hill, and it's not stopping anytime soon. And that finish is just nice and long and peppery. It has a nice bold kick to it. And that to me is where Rare Breed Rye shines, is in that palate and especially the finish. That's where, it has its own little thing. So you got like 101 Rye and you got like Russell 6 and Russell Single Barrel Rye. And this has it occupies its own little niche in the rye catalog.
This actually got a little orange creamsicle.
Yeah. I get citrus on Wild Turkey's rye all the time.
Yeah. So this is really good. It kind of races right past the front of the palate and just really kind of bold on the back end. I'm getting like, I liked what you said about the nose, that honey, lemon, kind of citrus tea.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit of mint, maybe a honey lemon mint citrus tea. And when you put it on the palate, it kind of, you don't get that upfront sweetness. It kind of goes straight to the back, and it's got that nice rounded flavor to it. I really like the I get a little bit of the oak coming through, and the peppercorn, maybe a little bit of peppercorn.
Yeah, pepper. Yeah, I get black pepper on it. It has, when you first taste it, it has this super brief sweetness. It's like, I'm going to be sweet. Oh, no, I'm not. It's like spice central. I mean, it just really, and like I said, it's like a roller coaster. It just, I think the example I used on my blog was that, it's like somebody comes over and kicks the door in, and it's like a good friend that comes in and raids your fridge and props his muddy boots up on your table. I mean, it's like you love him, but he's here to stay, and he's coming in strong,
I don't get that. What either one of you are saying, I guess. I get that sweetness, and it stays with me with a sweet spice, almost like a sweet pepper coming through. I do get that sweetness, that orange creamsicle coming through, and then you, like you said, it kind of punches you in the back of the throat a little bit with that pepper. Not overpowering, but it's still, the sweetness is still there. Actually, even with a finish, the sweetness is there for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. In different tastings, you can get different things. Different folks get different things. I think what I do is I compare it in my head to other Wild Turkey expressions. So let's say I was sipping the Russell 6 year. That's going to be a real sweet sipper. It's going to be a lot of honey, just in vanilla, like, pretty much from nose, palate to finish. You're not going to get a lot of spice. You're not going to get a lot of boldness. So in comparison to like that, this is like, it kicks it up a notch significantly.
It definitely has a kick to it.
Yeah.
And whenever I say I'm a weeded guy, it's more weeded bourbon and not a rye bourbon guy. But, the more ryes I drink and the more I taste, I'm starting to fall in love with those ryes. I'll never be a weeded guy, but rye whiskey though, especially this one's delicious.
Oh yeah. It's great.
Man.
Yeah. So this is a little bit bolder than I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm. That's got some youth to it. Like, as far as like numbers, it does, to me, it doesn't come across like cardboard or any of that kind of stuff where you have that. Don't take me wrong when I say it has youth to it, as in it's got negative youthful notes. It's got that 4-year whiskey to it. So it's going to have that rye kick to it, but it's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's really good. That's a sipper, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, David, can you take us through like Wild Turkey's history, like where to start and where's it at today?
So, I mean, you have the distillery and its history, and then you have the brand and its history, and they kind of, combine at some point, and then you involve two families like the Rippies, and then you have the Russells, and then there's several companies in between there. But the distillery that's now Wild Turkey Distillery, and I'm talking about the general location because they've had a brand new distillery built in 2011. But, that area, that spot that's known as Wild Turkey has been distilling whiskey for a long time. In the 1800s, it was known as Old Moor for a while. It was purchased by James P. Ripy Jr., who basically ran that for several years as Old Hickory Springs. He sold it to his nephews, the sons of the great distiller T.B. Ripy. His nephews named it Ripy Brothers. It operated till Prohibition, closed down and back up as Ripy Brothers again. It was purchased by the Gould Brothers. They called it Anderson County Distilling Company for a few years, then changed it to JTS Brown & Sons. It operated as JTS Brown & Sons all the way up until 1971, when Austin Nichols & Company, which was a wholesale grocer, from New York, or from Brooklyn, I should say. They purchased it, and it became the Austin Nichols Distillery. It was purchased by Pernod in 1980, and then they changed the name of it to Boulevard, but it was still known as the Austin Nichols Distillery formally. They sold to Campari in 2009, and now it's the Wild Turkey Distillery. The brand started in the late 30s, early 40s, but it didn't introduce to market until 42. And that started because an executive at Austin Nichols & Company named Thomas McCarthy was fond of wild turkey hunting, and he would take bourbon from their storage to these hunting trips. And his friends would always request that he bring the wild turkey bourbon because that's how they were familiar with it. And, light bulb went off. This is going to be a great brand. They introduced Wild Turkey. It becomes a favorite among, a lot of Americans, including celebrities and presidents. And so today we still have Wild Turkey. It's kind of changed in the mindset of the American people over time. I mean, it was actually a very prestigious brand for a while. And then it when the counterculture hit and bourbon took a dive, it became more associated with, the old man's whiskey. And then it kind of turned into the college whiskey. And I think now people are finally realizing that there's more to Wild Turkey than what they were originally, brought up to believe, growing up. So that's just like a real quick in a nutshell. There's a lot more history to it with the Rippies. There's a lot more history to it with the Russells. And there's a lot more history about Austin Nichols going all the way back to the mid 1800s. So if you want to learn about all that, you can check out my blog, or probably the best source is my book. And you can really dig in the book and find out a lot more about both the brand and the whiskey itself.
Yeah, for history nuts like me, that book was just it's amazing. And
thank you.
I can't wait to finish it. I'm just a nut on history, but the distillery itself is actually a beautiful place. Not when you drive up through the warehouses. To me, it's just kind of industrial there. But once you get to the visitor center and you walk into the visitor center, it's kind of the cathedral of whiskey distilleries inside there. It's very beautiful. And then you get to overlook the Kentucky River, which that's Americana itself right there.
Yeah.
Right?
When you take that bridge across the Kentucky River, it's pretty thrilling. And you see the distillery in the distance and you're just like, oh, this is, it's like your heart kind of skips a beat. Love it. That drive that's just killer.
Now, what is that one warehouse that's right there down towards the river and the bridge? Is that A?
A is the oldest rick house at Wild Turkey. It's been there ever since, James Ripy started he bought Old Moore, but I believe he built that rick house A when it was Old Hickory Springs. And I talked about this on another podcast. I love that rick house A has all this history within itself. And so, you got to think about all of the barrels that have aged in there over the years and how they've all left their mark, their angel share in the wood, the bracing and all that. And, so when you're in rick house A and you're smelling, those rick house smells, you're literally smelling history. That wood has, a history to it.
So you've written this book. Do you have a second idea? Do you have a second book in you?
Well, I don't want to spoil anything yet. I am working on another book right now. It's not about Wild Turkey, but it relates to Wild Turkey in some ways. It is whiskey centered or bourbon centered. So more on that, on another time, maybe the next time around, another year from now, I'll have more to tell you.
Is that Wild Turkey 2027 where they've got weeded whiskey, weeded bourbon now?
I don't think we're going to do weeded at Wild Turkey, but you never know. You never know.
So Joanne and Bruce, they're the new guard, right? So how do we expect things to kind of change under them, do you think? Obviously, one of the things is sort of the propagation of the rye expressions, but what else do you expect to see out of the new youth?
Well, it's interesting because I think that, one of the big things and that a lot of people forget about Jimmy Russell, he's known as this master distiller, this legendary master distiller. But Jimmy is the ultimate brand ambassador. Jimmy just has a humor to him. He has a relatable quality. He can talk to anybody. He can talk to you for hours, And Jimmy, back when bourbon was in the glut era and bourbon was in the dumps, he and Booker and some of those legendary master distillers like Parker and Elmer, they helped bring people back to bourbon just by talking about it, just by meeting with people, just by going to these events, whether it was at a store or a festival. And these are in the times when Scotch was big and bourbon was nothing, And I think people realized that there was something, to these individuals, particularly Jimmy Russell. And, he got people re-interested in the booze that was considered kind of like the everyman, the working man's kind of booze. And, he made it cool again. So the reason why I bring up that is because, Joanne is a brand ambassador and Bruce is a brand ambassador. And I think that the responsibility is on their shoulders right now to keep people, interested in the brand, much like their grandfather. And it's a very important job. I know a lot of people, they think of the words brand ambassador, as like, well, that's just kind of like a marketing person, and I don't think so. I think that, yeah, there are those people out there. There are people that are just getting a paycheck. They're brand ambassadors for a whiskey brand, and they're doing the gigs that they got to do. And then they go home and they could care less about whiskey like we do. Okay. But, Joanne and Bruce are passionate about what they do, just like Jimmy. And I think that's a very important thing to have. If you want to build your brand, you've got to connect with people, and you got to have people that believe in their product. And what better way to show it than to have, these grandchildren of the most legendary master distiller in the world.
Right.
I think that shows they relate to people. They're just normal people, right?
Exactly.
And they're very approachable. The whole family is very approachable.
Yep.
You'll hear stories about Jimmy being in Lawrenceburg eating at a restaurant there, and just that is where they go to eat.
Yeah.
And they almost eat out all the time, right? So that's their thing. Eddie's eating in town, and Bruce is eating in town, and so
they're just normal folks, just like you and me. And there are a lot of brand ambassadors out there. Not saying necessarily bourbon, but in Scotch or other spirits, rum and such. That, you have some, like I said, that just kind of punch the clock and do what they got to do, and then you have some that they kind of come across a little bit snobby. Like, I'm an expert, and you're going to listen to me talk to you for an hour about how I know everything about there is, about whiskey and our brand. And, I think people kind of get turned off by that. They're like, I've heard all this before, and, yada, yada, yada. And you're not really going to get that with Bruce or Joanne. Like, if you like to drink Wild Turkey with Mountain Dew, or if you like a Boilermaker, or, just a, quick and dirty cocktail, they're going to be all for it. Heck yeah, that's, you drink Wild Turkey how you like to drink it. They're not going to get snobby on you. They'll teach you whatever you would like to know about, whatever expression you'd like to know about, but you're not going to have some whiskey snob when you talk with any of the Russells. They're very approachable, and they care about their brand, and they care about their customers most importantly.
Well, David, a lot of us started out drinking our whiskey, our bourbon, not straight, not in a Glencairn, but in a glass with something else in it, whether it be Mountain Dew or Ale 81 or Coke, whatever it might be. Yeah. And we all came through that, and we've got people in our group now who still drink bourbon and Cokes. And we did an episode recently on that and it's one of our most popular episodes of all times. Now, it may be popular because it's so unpopular to talk about, but at the same time, there's a lot of people out there that are coming through that gateway, that gateway of mixing, and then eventually finding their way to sipping on bourbon neat.
Yeah.
But
and sometimes they don't. Sometimes people just like bourbon a certain way, like they like it in Coke, or they like it in ginger ale. They're not going to change. I see people all the time at the liquor store buying handles of Evan Williams or 101 or whatever, and they're going to go home and they're going to dump it in, whether it's tea or iced tea or sweet tea or ginger ale or Coke or whatever. And that's the way they like drinking it, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of us, like, they get serious about it, like us. We move into neat, but most of America probably does not.
Well, I tell you what, when it's 95 degrees outside and you're cutting grass, you got a hankering for a little bourbon. It's tough to drink it neat, right?
Yeah. No. When it depends on what I'm doing and what the temperature is. But if it's real hot and I'm going to be out for a long period of time, I do love some bourbon on the rocks. There's no problem with that at all. Matter of fact, I've actually been fond lately of Long Branch as a good outdoor summer bourbon because it's lower in proof, but it's not lower in age. So you get that nice, 8-year bourbon at 86 proof, and throw it over a couple cubes, and the ice melts and that kind of thing. But if you're just out there just
Sure.
playing with, the family or grilling or whatever, it's just fine,
Has a Wild Turkey kind of walked away from Matthew McConaughey? I haven't seen his commercials on.
I mean, he's still involved. He is the the creative director for the brand. They had a charity event last year where they gave back to first responders, and he was there for that. He's not as high profile as he was, say, in 2018, because that was the launch of Long Branch.
Sure.
And so, you saw him everywhere for a period of time there. I'm not sure, I'm not privy to all that. That's some big money and some big contracts, I'm sure. But from what I understand, he's still, definitely involved in the brand. He had the Talk Turkey series end of last year as well, the YouTube series called Talk Turkey. You got to check it out.
Maybe it's just the COVID that is kind of slowed everything
down.
The
COVID is slowing everything down. I mean, it really is. It's messing with every brand, not just Wild Turkey.
I love the guy because he's a Texas Longhorns fan.
Yeah,
I say hook 'em horns, and I love that he still uses all right.
Yeah, when I think of McConaughey, I don't think Wild Turkey. I just think True Detective and movies that I've been fond of. To me, he's very much an actor. But I think it's cool that he's not just making commercials where he's just like sipping it and going, hey, Wild Turkey. He's involved in different aspects of the brand, particularly shaping his own expression, Long Branch. So
I'm certain that he's brought a few young ladies to bourbon. There's no doubt about it.
It would not surprise me at all if the numbers have gone up thanks to his effort.
Right. I think they're buying more. What's that car that car he does the commercials of all the time?
Lincoln.
I'm sure he sold a few Lincolns too.
One of my favorite. Have you ever seen the Jim Carrey parody commercial he did for Saturday Night Live, where he did the Lincoln commercial as Matthew McConaughey?
I have not. No.
Oh man, it's gold. You got to check. I would try to do it for you, but I'm just not that talented, and I would ruin it. So if anybody's listening, check it out on YouTube. I'm sure you can find it. It's hilarious.
Find that.
Oh, it's great. He nails it.
Well, David, it's been a pleasure to have you on again. It's always great to drink some Wild Turkey expressions, especially with you. You're such a wealth of knowledge. We'd like to give you the opportunity to let all our listeners know where they can find you, where they can find your blog, where they can find your book, what you have going on, your Patreon, anything you'd like to let them know about now. Please do.
Okay. Well, my blog is rarebird101.com. And on that site, you will find plenty of Wild Turkey reviews. You'll find articles about history of Wild Turkey and some other things like how to decipher bottle codes and such. I have a Patreon account, which is patreon.com/rarebird101. If you're interested in getting a lot more information from me, because I try to post on Patreon, about every other day or so, as opposed to my blog, which is once a week. I also interact with the community on Discord through Patreon. If you're looking to talk to turkey fans about expressions or share your recipes for blends or pictures or stories or whatever, we're always talking to each other every night. I have a Twitter account, which is at @RBird101, and I have a Instagram, which is at RareBird101. And I'd love to talk to you if you have any questions about Wild Turkey or just want to chat. You can reach me. You can DM me, email me through my website, and I'll be happy to answer your questions or just talk turkey.
All right. Well, David, we certainly have enjoyed your time here with us. I've been a longtime patron of yours. I've also,
yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love the content you put out on your Patreon people. It's really wonderful. Your blog is always a must go to, no doubt about it.
Thank you.
As far as we go, we're the Bourbon Road. You can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all at the Bourbon Road. We have a private Facebook group.
So we got the Bourbon Roadies. It's growing every day. You can join our group. It's right around 750 people right now. You got to answer 3 questions. Are you 21? Do you drink bourbon? And do you agree to play nice? We just don't tolerate any rudeness in there. We say your bourbon your way. It's your Bourbon Road. Well, you drink it how you want to, with Coke, ginger ale, L81, whatever you're going to put in a Mountain Dew. So we do have master distillers in there. We've got industry leaders. They'll answer your questions. Always somebody in there saying something. Join our group. If you're listening to this episode right now and you haven't subscribed, scroll up, subscribe to our podcast for whatever app you're using to listen to us on. And please leave us a review on whatever you're listening to. That's what opens the doors. That's how we get to talk to guys like Rare Bird 101. Those reviews help us out. You can find me at One Big Chief.
I'm Jay Shannon 63, and you be sure to check us out every week, guys. We're putting out at least 2 episodes. We do a short format episode every Monday where we review a craft distillery, and on Wednesdays we have our long format. We bring a guest on like David, and we chat with them in detail. We do also have a website, thebourbonroad.com. We invite you to come in there, check out our blog. Mike writes most of them. He does a pretty good job. And you can listen to the podcast there. You can also communicate with us. We do have our merch on there as well. We do have some Glencairns. So if that's something you'd like to pick up, please, we invite you to do so. And we will see you down the Bourbon Road. We do appreciate all of our listeners, and we'd like to thank you for taking time out of your day to hang out with us here on the Bourbon Road. We hope you enjoyed today's show, and if so, we would appreciate if you'd subscribe and rate us a 5-star with a review on iTunes. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Bourbon Road. That way you'll be kept in the loop on all the Bourbon Road happenings. You can also visit our website at thebourbonroad.com to read our blog, listen to the show, or reach out to us directly. We always welcome comments or suggestions, and if you have an idea for a particular guest or topic, be sure to let us know. And again, thanks for hanging out with us.